We all know during SHTF, the average person is going to panic, and that panic will probably bring them back to one of the top 5 places you should avoid during SHTF because those people are going to be there. Now, before we get started, I want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can make videos like this one and give you ideas about preparedness, and of course, they have everything you need when it comes to gearing up for that SHTF event. So, big thanks to Midway USA. Now, the first place on this top 5 list that I would avoid during SHTF, and that I suggest you avoid as well, is going to be grocery stores or big box stores. Because some people buy their groceries at a big box store like Walmart, but in general, grocery stores and big box stores should be heavily avoided. Why is that? Well, generally they're going to be filled with people who are not prepared at all. And knowing they're not prepared at all and seeing this giant emergency situation occur is going to lead them to believe that their best chance of survival is going to the grocery store to get all the stuff that they need that they don't have right now, right? So canned goods, toilet paper, and everything else you can think of, they're going to go get once it happens, not beforehand. And so if you don't have to be there, please don't be there. It's going to be a very volatile environment with a lot of desperate people who are acting out of character. So the second place on this list that you should avoid during SHTF, unless you absolutely need to go there, is going to be pharmacies, hospitals, medical centers, nursing homes, anything related to medical. And the reason for that is because it's a place of comfort that people are going to go to in time of need. Any little thing that happens to them during this SHTF scenario, they think someone else can fix, like a doctor or some medication, or if they are on medication and they know they'll need more, they're going to go to the pharmacy in order to try to acquire it, or they have people who are part of their family admitted as patients in some of these facilities like nursing homes or hospitals that they want to try to get out. There's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of demands coming from this golden horde of folks who are trying to get to these medical centers. So at all costs, avoid any of those types of facilities unless you absolutely have to go. If you have no other choice but to go to the hospital, I mean, you got to go, right? But you should have plans in place beforehand to not need to go to any of these places, preferably, right? Now, the third place on this list that you should avoid during SHTF are going to be gas stations. Now, gas stations are going to be extremely busy because everybody needs gas and because a lot of people are going to be running away from whatever it is they're dealing with at the time. As we saw when the war in Ukraine started and everyone lined up at the gas stations in order to try to flee, right? The same exact behavior could be happening during any other type of event, especially when you see a hurricane come through. The same exact scenario unfolds. So we already have historical precedent showing that gas stations will be overrun by people during any type of major emergency. And a big reason for why you want to avoid the gas stations at that point in time is because you get these super long lines that are full of people who are very desperate, and that desperation leads to tension, and then that tension often leads to confrontations. And there's been plenty of different stories of confrontations occurring at gas stations during times of critical need and people not getting along very well, let's just say. So I would expect to at least have some form of self-defense if you're going to have to go to the gas station, but you should be planning ahead of time to not need to, right? So what's the fourth place on this list? The fourth place I would avoid during SHTF at all costs would be a gun store or even a sporting goods store. But you should not go to the gun store during this large-scale emergency situation. You might think you need to arm up, you might think you need more ammunition, you might think you need this, that, or the other, and really what you're going to be getting yourself into is a very dangerous situation. Gun stores are a magnet for those who are not prepared because they get a sudden urge for protection and they think about where they can get that protection, and obviously the first answer that comes to mind is the gun store. Well, here's the thing. Gun stores also attract a certain criminal element, which is problematic because those people are generally there to do bad things. And let's not forget the ownership of said gun stores who don't really need you to be there during this time. And in fact, this gun store may have been their backup plan for how to deal with the SHTF scenario that's unfolding, and here you are becoming a liability. So if you're not well armed before a major event happens, it's not worth the risk to try to get well armed right after. You should probably avoid those places as best as you possibly can. Now, the fifth place on this list that you should avoid during SHTF, as I get attacked by whatever bugs are all over me right now, is not what I used to say, and it's something that I'm changing now for the fact that we're here in 2024, right? I used to suggest something along the lines of not going to the bank, right? Because we have to expect bank runs and we have to expect people to be trying to get cash out and get access to their resources before they no longer have access. But here in 2024, I'm honestly not under the impression that a lot of people are worried about their bank account during a catastrophic crisis because a lot of Americans, I would venture to say a majority of Americans, don't really have that much money in the bank. They either have to spend it in general in order to just get by, or they may have it invested somewhere else that's a little bit, let's just say, less secure, but also maybe more free to use. And because of that, I don't even think the bank should be that big of a concern. And if you're worried about the bank, that's something that maybe you should be considering right now based on the current climate of things. But what I would avoid instead of a bank would be anything that has value in the sense of luxury storefronts. So whether or not that's going to be jewelry stores, whether or not that's going to be pawn shops that have a gold and silver exchange, whether or not that's going to be some type of high-end fashion brand or whatever it might be, anywhere that the average person assumes that there are items of high value is what you should be avoiding. Because as we've seen during riots and natural disasters, when looting begins, they target high value places, cell phone stores, computer stores, right? Like the Apple store. We also know that jewelry stores are often robbed during these times. And it's because the items inside represent a high value amount, which those people are hoping they can either recuperate in the form of dollars thereafter or just hang on to because it's something they couldn't afford to begin with. But those people aren't going to the bank. They're not robbing the bank and they're not trying to pull their money out of the bank because they don't have any money in the bank. And because robbing a bank is a bad idea during SHTF due to the fact that they generally have armed security or some form of security. And of course, the local authorities are going to protect a bank over a lot of other entities, right? As we've seen in certain states right now where crime seems to run more rampant. People aren't robbing banks. They're robbing luxury storefronts. And so that's what you should avoid, which should be pretty easy for you to do, but it's something to remind yourself of in case you find yourself out and about during these types of situations. Don't go somewhere where you know high-end, top-tier luxury shopping is available. That's going to be a target. And I don't know, the days of bank runs might not be as much of a thing based on this current economy, right? So those are the 5 places that I would avoid during SHTF, and I would suggest you do the same. And of course, there are many other places I would avoid as well, but these are my top 5 because I think they all represent an inherent level of danger as well as places you shouldn't have to go to if you properly prepare. And that's really the name of the game. If you are properly prepared, none of those places should be a need for you to get to during that time. The only one that might have some reasonability to it would be medical centers based on the fact that you might need medical attention or you might have someone admitted as a patient in one of these facilities that you want to help. And that makes sense. But everything else, you should have some plans in place for because they're probably not worth the risk. So let me know in the comments below what other places you would add to this list, and let me know if there's anything I talked about that you disagree with, because I think having these conversations is always beneficial. And of course, if you want to support the channel directly, you can go to magicprepper.com where there's lots of options there for you, including links to my Discord, my Subscribe Star, there's affiliate links with sponsorship discounts and all kinds of stuff. So check that out, and anything else you need from me at all, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.